Good evening. It's 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, and this meeting of the Sandpoint Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. I am Sandpoint City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton, and we'll begin by noting for the record, I think we'll do both the staff and committee members in attendance. We'll go around the table. If you would please each state your name for the record. And I'll hand it to you.
Okay, Amy Tweeten, City Planner.
Commissioner Ben McGran.
Commissioner John Hastings.
Associate Planner Sarah Gilmore.
Commissioner Wayne Bennett.
Commissioner Mose Dunkel.
Commissioner Scott Wolfschlager.
Sarah Lenz, Finance Director.
Commissioner Grant Simmons.
Thanks, Grant. Fonda Jovic, our city attorney, is on her way and will be joining us here shortly. We'll begin this evening's meeting with approval of the minutes from the committee's last meeting on February 4th, 2020. Would someone like to make a motion and second to approve the minutes?
So moved. Move to approve the minutes from February 4th, 2020.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm abstaining as I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Motion passes and the minutes are approved as presented. On this evening's agenda, we will be covering information on the committee's roles and responsibilities. We'll hear a report on development impact fee revenues, expenditures, and discuss the capital projects included in the current impact fee study, and we will discuss 2024 impact fee study. I'm going to start us with PowerPoint presentation, and Fonda has some handouts. So if you can bear with me tonight, will start us out with some of the roles and responsibilities, and we may have to circle back with Fonda with any questions on that. And like I said, she brought handouts for all of you tonight. This particular committee was formed by the city in compliance with the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act, which is in Idaho Statute 6782. The purpose of the committee is to ensure that adequate public facilities are available to serve new growth and development in the city, and to promote orderly growth and development by establishing uniform standards by which the city may require a payment of money imposed as a condition of development approval to pay for a proportionate share of the cost of system improvements needed to serve new growth and development. As you will see when we go through what is included in our impact fee study, fees may only support capital improvements, so impact fees are not used to support M&A. So for example, you'll see we've got capital improvement projects within our park system. What we don't support is the services that we provide through our park system with impact fees. The three key elements that these must fulfill is they must meet need, benefit, and proportionality of cost. So it's very unusual that you will see fees collected through development impacts paying the entire cost of a project or even a significant majority of a project. Our current impact fee study was prepared in 2011, September 28th of 2011, really implemented in 2012. And we contracted at the time with Tischler Weiss to work with the city on preparation of that plan. And it was based on the city's capital improvements plans and again, proportionate share determination for growth and development within the city. Under the rules of the statute, collected development impact fees must be expended within 8 years from the day that they were collected on a first in, first out FIFO basis. Except that development impact fees collected for wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal and drainage facilities must be expended within 20 years. The city is not currently collecting any development impact fees for wastewater or water. Any funds not expended within the prescribed times must be refunded pursuant to section 678211 of Idaho Code. And a governmental entity may hold the fees for longer than 8 years if it identifies in writing a reasonable cause why the fees should be held longer than 8 years and an anticipated date by which the fees will be expended, but in no event greater than 11 years from the date which they were collected. I'm gonna let Fonda circle back to any questions on overall the committee statute. And she should be here hopefully in about 10 minutes, but I will move us forward in a summary of what we've got in our development impact fees, and then we'll get back to Fonda before we get into the report. We're collecting fees based on the current study in place in 4 different categories: parks and recreation, police, fire, and transportation capital projects. Within parks and recreation, the components that are included in the plan are parkland acquisition and improvements, so both undeveloped as well as developed parkland, and specifically recreation, indoor recreation facility space. The methodology that is used relative to those fees is incremental expansion, so dollars coming in as and development of land acquisition opportunities and recreational facility development as we go. In police, B category police, the components that are included in that are police station improvements. So specifically needs identified in the study and continued needs for police are evidence storage, as well as communications infrastructure. And again, the methodology used was incremental expansion. So we are on an ongoing basis doing improvements in those areas in police. Fire, the components are fire stations as well as apparatus and equipment. So specifically identified were new fire truck, and impact fees, as you'll see as we move on, have been used to pay payments on the ladder truck that we acquired in fire. And significant equipment needs are things like their SCBA's, so those are their breathing devices, as well as communications equipment in fire. And again, the methodology is incremental expansion. In the fee category of transportation, components of that are street improvements, intersection improvements, as well as multi-use pathways. And I've got another slide that will talk specifically about the transportation projects that are included. These particular projects were identified from an adopted city plan at the time, which was our urban area transportation plan. We're in the process of updating our urban area transportation plan now, which is based on our multimodal transportation plan. And again, methodology is incremental expansion. Specifically, the transportation projects and status of those projects that are included in the plan. And I've included, based on what was included in the anticipated timing in years for completion, implementation of those projects. Widening of Schweitzer Cutoff Road, and that was from North Boyer to Sand Creek Bridge, so widening it to be an arterial. And second project was adding a roundabout at Schweitzer Cutoff and Boyer. Both of those projects were completed, so the widening of the road occurred in conjunction with the construction of the roundabout that exists today at Schweitzer Cutoff and Boyer. Another project that was identified was a traffic signal at Pine Street and Division with the addition of left turn bays to eastbound and westbound approaches. To date, we have not done a traffic signal at Pine Street and Division, and our most recent, study of Pine Street and Division and what's incorporated into the multimodal plan has improvements along Bridge Street that does not have a traffic signal at Pine Street and Division. We did install a four-way stop there a few years ago. There was also a right turn lane that was added at Pine Street and Division. But a traffic signal is no longer currently included in our multimodal plan. Fourth project included was the downtown two-way conversion. So that was converting our one-way streets to two-way streets. That effort was completed. However, we have a project that has been under design and is moving forward to City Council tomorrow night to award for construction. And that is moving the stoplight over from Church Street and Fifth Avenue back over to Pine Street and reverting Pine Street to two-way between First and Fifth Avenues. Yeah,
That project isn't part of the impact fee money.
yes, it is.
So does that go along with the state money that was just awarded?
There wasn't state money awarded for that. We applied for a grant that was going to do some roadway improvements and help fund the cost, but we didn't receive the grant award. You might be thinking when we came to council and asked for approval to apply for the grant.
So the governor just announced money for projects, and I thought I read that Pine Street was one of the projects. I don't know if it's in regard to that exactly, but it listed in this document that Pine Street was one that was.
We were probably listed on the funding list of projects that were considered, but we fell below the funding line for that project.
Okay.
So there was a project that was up in Kootenai that was awarded funds,
Mhm.
but our project fell below the funding line.
Okay.
Fifth project that was included in the plan was the curve on US Highway 2. So that was extending US Highway 2 as an arterial from Boyer and Cedar. So, and again, this is based on 2011, what were the capital improvement plans that were included in this study. Next project is Baldy Mountain with a project to widen it to an arterial between Boyer and city limits. Under our current multimodal transportation plan, this project would be included as an element with the Baldy extension that was included in the multimodal plan. That was for an underpass ultimately connecting through on Baldy to Highway 2. Next project was expansion, really a widening of Woodland Drive to a collector 3, and that remains as an identified project on our capital projects list. Next project was Larch Street, a reconstruction from Boyer to Division Avenue, which is not currently in our adopted multimodal plan. Hello, hi, I'm so sorry. It's perfect. I was going over projects and then we'll circle back to you.
Okay,
So-
sounds great.
Next project is Ontario Avenue, and that is realigning Ontario at Highway 2. So both sides of Ontario, so coming in Ontario to the north to Highway 2, and they're at Ridley Village to the south. And that is truing up that intersection, so it's a 90 coming in. If you've driven that, you know that your view at the angle that comes in is not good. We have that project budgeted in this year's budget and have identified that as our next priority in terms of transportation projects. And again, it is included in the multimodal transportation plan as adopted. And then finally, there was a project identified in 2011 in the capital improvement plan for roundabout at Cedar and Boyer. They're at Boyer and Maine. That currently is not in the updated multimodal plan.
So Jennifer, was the thought originally in 2011 that the fees generated through the impact fees would fund all these projects?
They're funding a portion of the projects.
Okay,
Yeah, and that's the challenge with impact fees is, as I mentioned, they're typically not funding 100% of the project. So, for example, on the curve project, I think that's the biggest one to use as an example. The city's proportionate share of that project in the impact fee study was identified as 500,000. Overall project cost was 5.5 million, with the notion that again, it would probably be an ITD project, and with ITD bringing most of the funding to the table and then growth paying its incremental share.
Is that the way it ended up working out?
Well, that project
We didn't
has
do that.
not been, yes, that has been quite the controversy.
so out of the 500
No,
grand.
this isn't the new 2 lanes that was constructed on. There that goes underneath the railroad bridge.
No, this was the curve project, which then in our multimodal plan was redesigned and became the
Right,
cutlet.
okay, gotcha.
So in that example, would the impact fees fund the 500,000 from the city, or is it only a portion of that?
It's a portion of the 500,000. Yeah.
You want me to explain why, or did you
Yep.
already go through that?
Yep.
The reason why is because the capital improvement projects, when you get an updated study and report, will identify what percentage is related to ongoing maintenance and repair and general maintenance, and what proportion is directly connected to growth. So impact fees can only be utilized for the proportionate share of the project that's directly connected to growth.
Gotcha.
So sometimes you'll have a project where the report will say it's 100%, we call it impact fee eligible. And then you'll have other projects that'll say they're only 50% or 25% impact fee eligible.
Thank you.
Is it city council who's determining the priority? How are these prioritized?
So their capital improvement plan ultimately is adopted by city council. Projects that are included in that plan, obviously this committee plays a component in that too, and making recommendations, and will be involved moving forward with the impact fee study for 2024. So what I'm reporting to you on here is the summary of what is included in the plan now.
Mhm.
So Fonda, do you want to, this would be the perfect time to circle back to you before we get to
Sure.
report
Hey,
on.
one question as we jump into that, Jennifer. So
Yeah.
we saw earlier sort of the logic of the impact fees. And so it was first in, first out funding. You have to, if you pull in a dollar, that dollar has to be spent within 8 years. Is that sort of a logic? I mean, you've got 8 years to fund. If
Yes,
you take a fee, you've got 8 years to spend that fee,
yes.
and it's first in, first out.
Or you
Just
have to
sort of
you have to refund it.
churn through that bucket, or you gotta refund it. Got it, all right.
Used to be 10 years.
Has the city had to refund?
I
any
wouldn't,
impact fees
I
to date?
wouldn't know that.
No, and Sarah does first in, first out, a FIFO analysis for us every year, and has done one in advance of this meeting.
So I brought for you a copy of 3 sections out of state code that are important to understand how the Sandpoint city code, the development impact fee regulations were drafted. Really, this is just to give you the definitions, because there's weird terminology in here that is not normal. So it's nice to have the definitions, and then to show you what's required in an impact fee ordinance. And then I brought you your impact fee section of your code, so you can see that the city's impact fee chapter is compliant with state code. And to give you an opportunity sort of to read this entire city code section, it's important as the committee that you be familiar with what the city code provides for. Actually, well, there's 2 pieces there for everybody. I'll just keep passing into, I don't know if I actually brought in that, we might have to share. You don't have to share with anybody. Keep going here, so we run it.
Good.
You're good? We made it? Oh.
So having not been here for the beginning, I apologize if this becomes a little bit redundant for what Jennifer went over, but I'm sure that we can't say it enough, that the impact fees are the direct result of work actually that's happening right now. So your comprehensive plan, which is driven by data, can be survey data, can be actual numbers data, population, projected population growth data. Your comprehensive plan, once it's completed, drives your master plans. We kind of did those a little bit in reverse, but we had all the data for the master plans. So that drives your master plans, your transportation and your recreation master plans, Parks and Rec, which then dictates what you can have in your capital improvement plan, which is where Jennifer just was. And then that capital improvement plan is the root of your impact fee study, which is where you are. You're right for an impact fee study to revisit your capital improvement plan and really take a good hard look at whether or not you want to make a change to your impact fees. So you guys as a committee, your responsibility is to give some direction for the study. And then when the study comes back, to really look at it, coupled with kind of where your growth is, non-residential and residential, because you can collect impact fees for both. And then make a recommendation to city council on whether or not to make an adjustment to your impact fees. And so you're probably right to increase your impact fees, to be quite frank. That's probably what your study is going to show. As you go through your Sandpoint city code where it talks about the report, it mentions in here the report, that's the impact fee study. So that's what will be completed, that you will not make a recommendation to council for them to adopt that report until you've worked with the consultant enough that you're comfortable with everything that's in the report. So does that make sense? It'll take you guys a few meetings to get through that. And the importance of impact fees, and impact fees have been historically controversial. They're pretty well settled in state law now, and they're really well settled in practice across the municipalities because the methodology and the language has been resolved over the last several years. But impact fees are a very common practice for trying to make sure that growth pays for growth. It only is going to pay for the initial growth development stage, where the initial analysis comes after that is once the city takes on that infrastructure that's a result of growth that's been proportionately or all or completely paid for by impact fees, do you have the bandwidth to maintain it? That's a different analysis. This is just growth paying for growth. And then again, recognizing that keeping up with that capital improvement plan, which is not your responsibility, but you're kind of married to it now, is really, really important, because that is the springboard to the utilization of impact fees for projects that need to be done within the city. So any questions on any of what we've talked about so far?
Is
Nobody has-
is there a consultant on board already to kind of update the Tischler Bice study?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No, the plan would be to issue a RFQ for a consultant after the first of the year. So this is kind of the orientation kickoff for the work that is coming down the pipeline tonight.
About how long will we need to come up with a good plan?
As many meetings as it takes for you guys to be really comfortable in what you want to recommend to council. It's probably going to take you,
Well, they typically take about a year.
well, they'll take about a year they have to get their study back first. So we don't know.
Study.
It all depends. Yeah, so if the study takes a year to get back, I'm gonna hope that they don't. We had one done in Hayden not that long ago, and only took them 4 months, but they were updating what had previously been done before because we ended up using the same consultant. So you're gonna do some work after that report comes back.
Okay.
Any other questions on any of this? Did you guys talk about at all where we are right now and what funds are available in
Nope,
impact fees?
That's what we are getting to next.
I didn't
is
mean
our
to transition.
Financial
you, but-
report, but that's why it was perfect to kick back to you.
Yeah.
Kind of round us up before we got into the numbers.
Right.
And I gave you all handouts with spreadsheets because you're gonna look at me pulling this up on the screen. I took Sarah's spreadsheets and put them in the PowerPoint presentation, but you will find it much easier to look at the hard copies in front of you, I suspect.
All right, so the top part of this is the budget. And that's on your first page here. So this is a 5-year look at the budgets, both the revenues and expenses. We do have at the very top of the revenues is the actual anticipated amount that we're going to receive during the year. That just says impact fees, and then the parks, police, fire. Beginning cash is the amount that's budgeted that is actually in reserves that we're budgeting to use for the projects for the year. So there's two parts of the revenues that are budgeted. Down below that are the expenditures that are budgeted by the different type of projects for the year. Yes.
The basis for this is based off of the report that was produced by the consultant back in.
Yes, and then also so the report, and then also departments, the department heads are the ones that actually will coordinate and put these, we'll get them all in the budget, and then it goes through council and the regular budget process, and then it's just adopted by council annually.
So then all the way up through 2023 are these actuals, and then 2024.
So
Second
budget.
page.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
page 2 is gonna give you the actual.
Yes, yeah. So the first page is the budget, and the second page are the actuals of what came in. So, again, that's, same type of, format. The revenue at the top and the, expenditures on the bottom.
Is there any analysis to why there's this very large variance?
Depends on who is the director over these projects and who is directing them, is my opinion. And also COVID was a big hiccup in things that were going on, in projects that were done and what was being budgeted versus actually that was done.
Well, sorry, I guess it's gonna be important when we go forward into this next analysis period, right? Like, what were the planning assumptions, and what were the causes for these variances? I mean, because if you're planning like 2019, for example, well, I guess 2000, we have actuals for 2020. For 2020, the actuals was 275,000, planned for 427,000. I guess it's all COVID related. Actually, no, it's 957,000
So-
budget.
You gotta look at the beginning cash. That is all that's all the beginning cash that's being budgeted to use for projects. That isn't actually what we're gonna be collecting during the year. So what you're seeing here on the actuals are what we actually collected. So the beginning cash we're not going to collect, but you have to budget it to have a balanced budget.
When the impact fees are collected, are they collected dedicated to parks, police, et cetera, or is it
Yes.
one fee and we
Yes.
decide? No,
No,
they are
no.
dedicated for each of those.
Yes, so as they come in, it is basically coded in the system to go directly to these cash accounts.
Gotcha.
And then as things are expended, the exact same thing. They're
Okay.
coded to come out of those cash accounts as well. And that is analyzed every month as we are doing on the back end, month end, year end, all that is all reconciled.
Gotcha.
So we'd be curious to Ben's comment, just to explore the discrepancies between, we don't do it tonight, but between the budgeted fees and the actual, just as it relates to construction value, because the past couple of years have been really quite busy and they're still not quite matching up. So just as this group considers impact fees moving forward and how that can meaningfully impact the city, you know, what would be reasonable to expect? Where did these budgets go wrong, say, in COVID versus what to expect kind of moving forward, and what kind of actual revenue should be expected?
Yeah,
And
and
that
I-
really guide the conversation, because it's a fair chunk of change between the two.
well, a lot of these are beginning cash. So again, going back to the cash, that's not actual revenue we're gonna receive. We already have those. And we're just budgeting as revenue to spend for the expenditures. So there isn't, wouldn't you subtract that? And I can actually add that to the analysis if you want.
Yeah,
That way then it would be easier to read that.
yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Okay,
But the actuals, the total expenditures, we barely spent, what, called $650,000.
yeah, so on the actual side of things for the expenditure side. Now, I was just talking about the revenues. On the expenditure side, that all comes back to the director who is directing these projects. I have no control on those at all. I'm just reporting what's done.
Crack the whip on.
Yeah, it's-
Part of the challenge is particularly when you get into and where you'll see the balance line, it's in the transportation projects. So we're collecting funds for multi-million-dollar transportation projects that are to a great extent dependent on leveraging outside funding. The impact fees are not paying a significant portion of the project costs. So again, that varies from project to project. But the timing on the transportation projects in particular can become completely tied to when we can leverage the outside dollars. Most of our transportation capital projects are funded primarily with grant dollars. And particularly the large projects that were identified in this 2011 plan. And I think as you're going into rate study for next year, I think this is a good caution tale for you really to be looking at with what projects, and for the city to be looking at what projects are we including and not including, and how viable are those projects with the timelines given to them when we're dependent on outside funding.
So Amy, on that project list, is there a way to identify that says, anticipated project costs, amount funded by impact fees, amount to be funded through grants or
For city
whatever?
funds. Mhm.
Yeah. I think that'd be helpful. I mean, because when you look at this, you got, over, call it $2.5 million supposedly collected here, right? This balances cash balance.
Well, and you can't, it's like, if you look at the cash balance of each one on the last page, like all $1.2 million of transportation impact fees isn't available to any and all capital improvement projects on the list.
Yeah.
They have to be, the funds, the impact fees collected have to be used on the projects where that development impacted, say, an intersection.
Yep.
So it's not like you can use impact fees from this side of town over here.
Right. Yeah, that's where it'd be helpful to see maybe that these are the projects and these are the funds that are identified from an impact fee standpoint.
I think as we're going through this whole process, that's exactly what I'll bring to the table as well, because we'll also know if there are other grants out there, or if we anticipate things, what other funds we have in the general fund, because this is a planning across the whole entire city, not just this one fund. So that is a big portion of this, is what do we have in our other funds? If we have zero in other funds, it just, and we don't, but that makes a big difference in this. So that's where I then bring that to the table as well. As so if I go back and do homework, if whatever you guys ask me to do.
And I
So-
think that for tonight's purposes, nobody wanted to overwhelm you with
Yeah.
all of those details.
Yeah, that's certainly moving forward. And typically what you have is jurisdictions are doing a 20-year capital improvement plan. And that's one of the things that we've been working on, and you're identifying those shorter term projects. For us, we've looked out 5 years. That's typical with jurisdictions looking at those. And there becomes some real unknowns when you start getting beyond 5 years, most particularly with transportation projects, because again, you're so reliant on grant funds, and that's not just a Sandpoint thing. That's generally all jurisdictions across states. And so you're doing some movement in that CIP, if not necessarily every year relative to what projects are on the plan, but relative to ranking of those projects within the plan based on funding availability.
And fees are tied to projects, meaning they're earmarked by project.
Yes.
Got it. There's not like. even though
The
there's a
developer's
transportation
proportional share of its
So-
impact on the infrastructure.
bucket,
So Parks and Rec, public safety, transportation.
But you might have 10 initiatives in Park and Rec. Each one has to be earmarked to impact fee,
Not necessarily.
or is there just a transportation bucket? There's
There's
parks
a
bucket,
transportation
there's
bucket. They're broken down by these buckets.
it.
They have
Got it.
separate fees
Okay.
per bucket.
a Slice of the pie.
Yeah, like, cause you'll have, let's say, residential impact fee rates that maybe are by square foot, but you're gonna have public safety that's, calculated completely different. So the buckets are different because the methodology of calculating the impact fee per project is
Got it.
different.
How was that decided?
It's built into your study. It'll be recommended in your study.
And also, we don't collect impact fees for water or sewer.
Or stormwater currently.
Is that typical?
They're not allowed by statute,
Oh, okay.
Well, there's a new user facility fee that's typically,
but that's not an impact fee, but
Gotcha,
yes,
yeah.
that's correct.
But in stormwater, you're starting to see more and more inclusion of stormwater facilities in impact fee studies. So that's, but right now, stormwater primarily, as we're doing projects, is funded by the general fund. But we don't have any stormwater projects identified in our impact fee study currently.
So
It's
Fonda,
only transportation, parks, public safety.
the question, I think you've already answered it, but just to be clear, so if the bulk of new development and infrastructure or the bulk of fees collected would be up in the Boyer area, for example, could those go to fund projects in South Sandpoint, like along in the park system?
In the park
Or-
system,
Like, can they be used? So you got a bucket, right? A parks bucket. Does that have to go to funding parks in that vicinity? Does it go to expanding existing parks that they might use? And same for, streets. If the Boyer development, those students go to Farm and
there
Stidwell.
has to be a nexus between that particular development and where you're applying their potential impact.
Okay, so those particular fees
So
are
traffic
tracked. So they're in the
fees-
bucket, but they're still kind of
Yeah.
separate in that bucket.
Yeah.
Too. Okay.
They're separate in the bucket. So traffic gets a little easier if your development rises to the level of a traffic impact analysis. If you just get a trip gen letter, it's not as clear, but if you get a traffic impact analysis, it's gonna say, this is where the intersections that are affected, this is the
Gotcha.
connectivity that's affected, and that gets a little more clear. There's more discretion in some of the other buckets, but there has to be a nexus between the development and the impact that you're collecting the fee for.
Gotcha. Thank you.
In our current study, our parks, they aren't split up with different fees geographically for the different parks. So looking at our parks are serving across the city, whether it's City Beach or the sports complex serving the broader city.
You get a little more
Memorial.
discretion there than you do on like traffic.
Yeah.
You'll get a little more, you'll get a lot more discretion on public safety, for instance, police and fire, which is relatively new. The statute just changed recently to allow collecting impact fees for police and fire, which is why their amounts in here are much lower than the others.
on the calculation of impact fees currently, is it based off of project valuations, square footage, like if we're using a
think they're
commercial
different.
project?
You'll have to look at your previous report and it'll tell you what the methodology is for each one.
It's based,
But-
trips, and I'm sorry, it's not appropriate, but, I don't want to interrupt you much, but.
We can, so what you need to do is know what the existing study says that's been adopted by the city, the report that's identified in your city code. And be familiar with that. You're gonna get a similar methodology coming in across the board for your different buckets.
So like when a set of permit plans comes in,
Pay at the time of building permit.
who's doing the calculation? This is you owe.
It's established in the fee system on how to do it, on how to calculate it.
Square footage for non-residential and residential based on bedroom count, 0, 3, 3 plus, and then.
Got it. And so part of this next study will be, does that methodology work? Is it appropriate?
Should it be
something
changed?
different?
Yep, yep.
Balances. Do we address that?
These are the ending, these are balances as of 9/30. They're evolving throughout the whole entire year. 9/30 is a good cutoff because that's our fiscal year end. So that's why I give these balances as of the end of the year. So
Anything purchased with impact fee funds has to have a useful life of 10 years or more.
Hmm.
It used to be that no rolling stock for your public safety could be included at all, and you can't use it for wages. But it used to be you couldn't even have rolling stock, so no police cars, fire engines, anything like that. It's been determined now, the fire trucks specifically have a longer than 10-year useful life, and so you can use impact fees for fire trucks. There are municipalities pushing the envelope and buying police cars, but that really requires a front-end analysis of an average, like, number of miles that it drives per year, because you have police cars in a county that can put on 150,000 miles a year that are not going to last 10 years. You'd have police cars in a city that drive 3 miles, you know, a day or 10,000 miles a year that might actually get a 10-year useful life. So you can't use impact fees for wages, and you have to be really careful with rolling stock, electronics, radios, things like that. You have to be able to prove on the front end when you use your impact fee money for things like that, that you have actual evidence of a useful life beyond 10 years.
Jennifer, how is the city budget for the maintenance of these capital improvements?
That's included in our general budget. It's part of our M and L in
So
our
if we
budget.
say we're gonna spend $1 million on a park, then it's gonna cost $100,000 to operate that park.
Per year.
You guys
Yeah.
are,
Then we're budgeting M and O, and you've seen in recent years where we've done things, for example, when we replaced the field turf at War Memorial Field, we knew that that turf had about a 15-year life. And so we set aside dollars for replacement of that turf every year since that turf went in, which historically the city wasn't doing. So we've done that with War Memorial, with the new James E. Russell Center that's going in. You'll see coming to council in January with interest earnings on the donation that will be going into an endowment fund to support future capital improvements, M&O of that facility. So that's something recently that we've built in, is really planning. So we don't have suddenly a year where we've got the field replacement, for example, which is estimated at $1.1 million. So we're essentially rating all of our other projects to be able to pull that off.
so does this committee have to have that purview at all from a maintenance standpoint? I mean, obviously, we're looking at capital improvements.
You're
but do
just
we have
setting
to-
it, you're just setting impact fees. You're not looking at any of the maintenance side.
Good. Alright.
Now,
So-
that's where it's gonna get tricky though, because when you sit on planning and zoning as a commissioner, there will be periods of time where you're evaluating a project and you have to take your impact fee committee hat off. And you have to be a commissioner, or you come here and you put your impact fee committee hat member on and take your planning and zoning commissioner hat off. So there's some compartmentalizing that has to occur.
Thank you.
But it certainly, as you're going through the projects, as we're reviewing the CIP plans, we're looking at what to include and things like that, questions about associated maintenance costs, what's the plan, the city's plan for that? Those are fair questions and certainly can be part of the discussion.
Absolutely.
Do we have data available for how the impact fees in the city of Sandpoint compared to other?
They're significantly low. I wish I would have brought that spreadsheet because we just did it in Hayden and we compared Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden, Sandpoint, all that are the bigger cities around, and Sandpoint's on the lower end of all of them.
5% low, like magnitude.
Well, they don't all measure the
Oh,
same,
and they're not gonna map the same way.
right, but you're at the bottom of the list.
Gotcha.
One thing that Sandpoint has not done historically, where it's a common best practice and you see other jurisdictions doing it, where they are adjusting their fees, reviewing their fees and adjusting their fees based on CPIs or the appropriate
Okay.
index. So
Gotcha.
historically, Sandpoint has not done that. And then you see when we're going back and revisiting rates, you see that we are taking big jumps for not doing that. So a recent example relative to rate studies would be in our utility rate studies, if you followed that at all, where we were doing the water and the sewer. I mean, we hadn't made any adjustments in our rates in 10 years. And typically what you'll see is a jurisdiction going back and visiting that, looking at CPI utility indexes and making appropriate rate adjustments. And similarly with impact fee studies too, based on public works calculators, construction price indexes and things like that, because you start out with a plan estimating what the cost of a project is going to be. Example I can give you that Holly and I were talking about today was the Ontario improvements, that realignment on Ontario. If you go back and look at the impact fee study, the estimated cost for that project was $432,000 approximately. So we're collecting fees based on a project cost of that. Our multimodal plan, when updated and adopted a year and a half ago, had that project at just over $500,000. So we haven't adjusted, which was good actually, that we weren't too far off. However, we're collecting based on a $432,000 project when we know it's over $500,000 now.
And it's important to know that impact fees are a political decision. The consultant will provide you a maximum legally supported impact fee, will provide you and then the council. You'll make a recommendation of what you think that fee should be. Some cities choose to reduce the fee from what the maximum allowable is because they're afraid it's going to deter growth. Other cities go right at the maximum. So it is ultimately a political decision whether you're going to use general fund dollars to pay for expansion or cost growth to pay for ongoing.
The other option, and I've seen this happen too, is that the report will come out with the maximum allowable, and because it's a big jump, the commission will recommend to phase into it. So let's do this much in year 1 and this much in year 2, and let's get to that maximum in year 3. But when the report comes out, you'll be presented with all of your options at that point and all of your decision points. I've had some that say, you know, that commercial impact fee is just, it's gonna drive business out of town. We just can't charge that much. And so they'll go maximum on the residential, but they'll scale it back on the non-residential because of fear of what it'll cost businesses. So Jeremy's right. There's lots of decision points. You don't necessarily, nor should you rubber stamp the report when it comes in. You really should have a robust discussion, and we'll help you with that, with what you should be looking at and how you should be looking at it in relationship to the needs of the city.
Can you be selective? Like, could you say if you're bringing an affordable housing project to it, then you're not going to have any impact fees?
There are opportunities within Idaho code to allow impact fee credits or exemption from impact fees. As long as you built it into your ordinance, you don't have that really clear in your ordinance at all. You have impact fee credit fees, but to philosophically, yes. Again, that's another political conversation. Philosophically, yes, but you'd need to make some adjustments to your ordinance. But it is provided for in state code.
I think, Bonnie, you have to backfill that
Yep.
with general fund dollars.
Yep.
So you're basically stuck with the general fund dollars.
So if you make them exempt, yes, then you're backfilling.
And we also, the council in 2011, excluded parks from the commercial. There's a lengthy discussion right where you're sitting, where they said, you know, are business growth causing people to use our parks? Should they be paying a portion of the park fees? And the council said, no, really the residents use the parks. So they took the park component out of the non-residential fee structure. So only residents pay the park portion of the fee.
And
that
again,
varies.
it'll come out in the report what their recommendation is in relationship to that. You can relook at it.
It's gonna be some fun discussion.
There's some good ones.
I
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah,
I bet.
it is. It's a good.
Yeah.
But that's why you put a committee like this together, and that's why the code requires certain types of people and you meet the qualifications, but yeah, it's good discussion. Impact fees are critical. It's a really good place to get sued if you get it wrong. So it is really important to get it right.
The biggest problem in the state right now is Idaho does not allow impact fees for schools.
That's right.
I work for Tisha Bice, and you know that. I did some in South
What's the
Carolina.
logic around that?
You know,
Because
it's-
most school districts are not isolated to within the city jurisdictional boundaries,
Gotcha.
and because they're
Services wider.
cross jurisdictional.
Gotcha.
The school districts have cross jurisdictional boundaries,
Because of the school.
and because of the state funding, because of the way they have state funding that your municipalities and districts don't.
No, it's a big issue though, and we're pushing at the state level to try to get it changed and authorize them. I did one in South Carolina with just the school impact fee, $24,000 per resident. And get challenged to the Supreme Court and passed. I actually worked on the spreadsheets for it. And I mean, that's one of the things we really need to change in Idaho is if we can get them eligible for school.
Right.
Because there's no way for school to expand other than levies without it.
Milton will go pipe to break.
Yeah. Yes, I'd love the day
So
off.
you know where we are to set this up, moving forward is, you know, we've been working on our master planning efforts. So those master planning efforts inform really the development of our capital improvement plans. So we completed the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, our multimodal transportation plan. We have been going through a facilities review and planning across the city. All of these efforts led into an initial capital improvement plan, which was approved by the council. So we've got identified the long-term projects, but we really have it honed in with the next 5 years of projects, and a lot of that effort then informed when we went out to voters identifying street projects and sidewalk projects to be included in the local option, the visitor tax, the increase on the hotel motel tax, because remember, again, when we're doing our citywide capital improvement, we're beyond impact development fees. They may be a component. They may be part of some projects and not part of others. So we're looking citywide at all of our capital projects. We just completed in the last 6 months a study, a report that was looking at our utilities collection and distribution system and really assessing capacity within that system. So this goes beyond our wastewater treatment plant, but really looking at the veins, the arteries that are either coming in or going out of those plants, and where we were with capacity and growth needs there. In the last year, we also undertook our initial rate studies. So our priority relative to rate studies was our utility rates, both our water and sewer rates. And that was a pretty intensive effort of about 9 months. I think we ended up with the utility rate studies, undertaking both sides of that. And that was our priority to get done because we really needed to have those rate studies to inform dollars for replacement of the wastewater treatment plant. As you all know well, during this same time, the comprehensive plan has been moving through. You've spent a lot of time on that, and with the most recent workshops, and then that will be coming back to you and council after the first of the year. Stormwater plan for the next year. We have a stormwater facilities plan, but really need to do an update to that plan, but need to get this moving forward really simultaneously. So we had identified budgeted for impact fee rate study for this fiscal year, starting in the first quarter of calendar year 2024. In that first quarter of 2024, always at the beginning of the year, we're going into strategic planning with the council. We're revisiting our strategic plans. We're reviewing our capital improvement plans. So again, we'll be going back and visiting that with council first quarter of 2024, and then moving forward to finalizing impact fee plan beginning in 2024. So next step for us would be getting an RFQ out for consultants. We anticipate this committee coming back and meeting shortly after the first of the year with, again, a big undertaking going into 2024 to both get familiar with what we have as well as where we're going.
And I look forward to working with Jennifer and Amy and Sarah and Fonda starting in 2 weeks. And I lived and breathed these for a year and plus as a consultant. So if you have any questions anytime, feel free to reach out. I'll be coming to all your meetings and helping through the process.
Question on the capital improvement plans. If the impact fee study is running in parallel with the comp plan and the capital improvement plans, is the consultant going to be able to provide meaningful input on the bucket of fees we're trying to generate and how that attributes to capital improvement projects for all these new plans? That way we can even decide if it's too much or too little or why we're advising on anything, because it seems like if they're in parallel, you kind of need to know what those capital improvements are before we can know even remotely how much, like, is what we're charging fine, or is it at a huge deficit, or is it a surplus?
Yeah, and we've got that included in our capital improvement plan right now. What our list of projects are, what our 5-year projects are, what the estimated cost for all of those projects are.
Okay, so
So
we'll be able to
we'll
look
be
at spreadsheets
providing
with
that
those.
to you, to the consultant, going through those.
Okay.
Yep, for
Cool.
sure.
And those are based mostly on the master plans,
Correct.
where the projects are pulled out of.
Yep.
Will they change with the comp plan? It's just there's
The
that thought.
the comp plan attempted to bring all of those master plans together. So it still refers, it'll say, here's information on the comprehensive plan has very high level information on transportation, then sends you to the multimodal for way more detailed information and the projects.
Okay,
Now, it's not to say that the project, your master plans can be amended as well. And your comp plan will still be pointing to your master plans.
okay, thank you.
And that does happen. Again, we have on council agenda tomorrow the signal, and they're also going to be undertaking a discussion on the truck route on Superior coming into First and on Pine, and I suspect probably making a decision to eliminate that as a truck route. And so that will change our truck routes in our multimodal plan. So we are going back to our plans and making amendments to some extent as we go, because new information has happened, new development has happened, so they're meant to flex over time.
My question was how frequently is this process supposed to happen, where we analyze these impact fees and come up with, I mean, I noticed we approved meeting notes from 4 years ago. Was that normal or is that COVID?
We had, the plan, good question. So the
Very
plan was to get all of this going. We met in early 2020 was when we met, and we had great plans of moving forward with studies and all kinds of things. And COVID hit, development went crazy, community participation and just committee meetings became difficult. So things got put on hold. Generally, it's a best practice that we should be revisiting really in an in-depth effort, our studies every 5 years. And really there should be an annual review with adjustments is what I would recommend to you.
And the
Or a
hiring of the-
report to council that
Yeah.
says we've met as a committee, we've looked at it and we don't suggest any changes at this time. But there should be there's required a report to council every year.
And the hiring of the consultant like we're talking about now, that's like an every 5 year sort of thing.
Yeah. Or earlier, if you
Or if
see
you feel like-
significant adjustments. What you want to have is be able to support your recommendation to council with data from a professional that none of us are.
Gotcha.
So you don't want to make adjustments to those fees significantly without some data to support it or some legitimate reason. That's why we use the consultant, and they're not cheap, so
They're not.
every 5 years.
I'm currently doing Priest River, and I'll tell you, I can post all these tabs, it is 50 tabs.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not exactly 50 tabs of metrics all tied together. It's the most amazing analysis that you'll ever see. It's really cool.
What we did with our our rate studies that we had done on the utilities is our requirement with the consultants was that they give us the tables. So Sarah actually has those tables and we can sit down and start doing what ifs. So we can do some of that work in between the time of the consultant coming in as well. So we aren't completely reliant on a consultant revisiting whether there should be rate adjustments. So based on those tables, we can start plugging in completed capital projects. A new capital project came up that we weren't expecting, and what is that doing? And tell us we need to do with rates. And so we're revisiting that on an annual basis, determining again when it's appropriate that we really need to bring out a consultant to do a more deep dive effort, and we're not just guessing.
And to that point, there's a fee in the impact fees, which actually you can charge in growth or the development and payment of the consultant to update the fee. We currently have that in place right now. So the growth is paying for the renewal every 5 years.
And Jennifer, will you run the RFQ? Are you on point for that? Or is there somebody else within the city that would manage that process?
Usually it's through division heads, myself, obviously mayor's involved with some review on that. And then Cheryl is our contracts procurement manager. So she's the one officially that becomes the point of contact for anytime we're putting something out to bid. We have an RFQ, we have an RFP, whatever we might have. She's not necessarily and generally is never on the back end of a selection committee, but this committee probably comes into play where we narrow down, here's what we got, here's the finalists, and involve this committee in a discussion on who we select.
On replacing a field surface like Memorial, would that fall into maintenance and? Or is
Typically
that,
not, because yes, It is more of a
It's
maintenance, so it's because of use, we need to do a replacement. It's not because of growth that we need a new field surface. So that's a really good question is, again, we're thinking about what projects fit in and which ones don't. If we're replacing something because of use, that needs to be built into our M&O budget, and it certainly needs to be included in our capital improvement plan. And so like Memorial, looking out that 15 years, it needs to be on there. So we know that year that's coming up, we're tracking the allocation of dollars towards it, but it wouldn't be something that would be in an impact fee study.
Think of expansion. It's
Yeah.
expansion. You can't cure your own deficiencies.
Like an example on the other side of a park project that we've got this year that's included for park impact fee is expansion of the skate park. So as we're getting more development, we've got more youth coming in, we get higher use. We're responsible for replacing our bowl and what we have, but expanding to accommodate the growth and demand of the community that falls under impact fees.
Did COVID open the opportunity to get an extension from the eight years or longer, or is that even necessary?
We're at like 6, 7 years right now, and I think with this new thing, I think we're gonna spend it. We'll be fine. Believe me, it is, we'll be fine. If we get the study updated, we get new projects going, we will have it spent.
I mean, you can see that with what Sarah's done for you, taking a look at your revenues, your budget and your actuals. What you can really see when you start to look at that number, impact fees were coming in, they weren't coming in substantial numbers with our historic growth rates. Then you start to see a huge shift that has happened over the last couple of years. And as things trend out, we could see it trend out again, so.
And I'll defer to Fonda, but I've seen a number of cases where if you have a good reason, the council simply has to draft a letter saying this is why we're extending this period, the full period. So the best thing about impact fees is when the growth comes in, when growth is rapid, you want the money to do the project, and if growth drops off, you don't need projects because you don't have the growth, so the revenue's not there. You don't have to do the project.
That's all we had for presentation, unless there are any other questions on this.
I think most of my questions are gonna be on data.
Yeah.
So the consultants, or is that something that, Sarah, you can provide for commercial versus residential revenue on the impact fees?
We don't,
Yeah.
internally, they just get, we can
I
pull.
may have those original.
Because as we're looking at the residential versus commercial rates, what was that construction value? How much revenue did it generate? And again, what's anticipated in the future, just to be able to.
That would be with the consultant,
Okay.
yes, not me. I mean, the consultant would be the one that we will be providing all the data to. They're the ones that are gonna be doing all the analysis and all that kind of
And
stuff.
so they'll look at kind of even the historically from 19 through this year, 23, kind of, can they go back and see what was generated based off of our current impact fee structure?
I think they're going on a go forward, like honestly, I've never been part of one of
It
these studies,
depends
so.
what is
Yeah.
included and what we want them to do in the analysis. So, for example, I'm gonna go back to our utility rate study. We had included a component that was an equity analysis. So they actually went back looking at historically what we had collected by type of user, and did an analysis on that. And that became a big part of our discussion. So we have the data that you're asking for, but it's a matter of pulling it all, getting that into reports. So we have the data on what specifically, what projects, what addresses, what were the collected.
Yes, but it's not something I'm gonna be doing for like this group at all. It'll be something that we provide to them.
And
They
they
do
put it-
everything.
And maybe it's not a value, maybe it's a data metric that we don't need to analyze.
Yeah, and
Yes,
whether
yes.
they do it or whether that becomes a staff effort, going back through our historic records and really breaking these out, it can be done either way. So,
I think it's always nice to look at how things are done historically before we.
Yep.
Yeah.
Move forward too.
Yeah, especially the difference between residential and commercial. Yeah, that's a good point.
The biggest drivers for commercial, it's all based on trip generation, vehicle miles traveled over trip. So if you have a high intensity, vehicular use, their fees are gonna be way higher than a very low intensity vehicular.
So for instance, a drive-through restaurant like McDonald's gets charged a higher impact fee because it's based on trip gen and it's average trip gen than not a doctor's office, an accountant's office,
Right. Yeah.
for instance. So two commercial spaces, totally different uses and totally different impact fee calculation.
Hmm.
And then residential goes a variety of different ways. It can be straight up per square foot. It can be up to 1,500 square foot residential, single family residential is this number, 1,501 to 2,500 is another number. They'll give a recommendation and you can decide whether that fits the city's needs or not. And commercial, or we like to just call it non-residential, it's gonna be broken into a variety of categories for you.
Sorry for my detailed questions.
It's okay.
Will the consultant also be looking at barriers to entry for affordable housing and maybe some of the reasons why there's commercial properties that have still stayed vacant downtown versus also kind of, okay.
No.
And just if these fees, and as we talk about adjustments, are they gonna have a meaningful impact on future growth and or developers' decisions to invest in certain areas?
So that's when it comes back to you guys with the maximum amount that you could go to the public with for a change in these fees. That's when you're gonna look at it and go, oof, if we charge every drive-through restaurant a $45,000 impact fee, they're gonna go to Ponderay. I mean, those are literally the types of conversations you're gonna have.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'm not making that number up. Sometimes that's the impact fee.
Yeah.
Or if you do industrial, you do light industrial per square foot, those guys can end up with a $200,000 impact fee depending on how big their building is. So when you get the categories for non-residential is a little more cut and dried. When you get the categories for non-residential, you'll really want to study those and really understand what those different categories are and why those impact fee numbers are being recommended.
Yeah, it can be a land use planning tool.
Yep.
You'll notice in our study when you read it, we have different zones and we were trying to incentivize at the time development downtown. So Tisha Vice looked at some of the urban renewal contributions to the downtown and we're able to adjust those fees a little differently. So they are lower downtown. There's a lot of sausage making where you can affect what you want to happen on the landscape and legitimize it through different analysis.
So this affects new construction, development, remodel, expansion.
Not remodel unless you are expanding beyond your original footprint.
Or if you're going from accountant's office to a drive-through.
Right, that's a change in use.
You get a credit for the square footage of what it was as the accountant's office. And then you pay for the differential there.
So like with the industrial, you could have a component say, oh, we have this large entity wanting to come to the area. We can relax some of these to incentivize them to
You
show
can't
up.
be discriminatory. These are, you can't say, we're going to waive impact fees because we like this business. When you're looking at this report, it's going to be setting an impact fee for these variety of uses irrespective of who they are.
But you could do it independent on zones, like Jeremy was saying, there could be the downtown.
All
has
depends.
slightly different. Yeah.
You really need to take a hard look at that. They did it for a legitimate purpose in the past. Who knows if that legitimate purpose still exists?
That's where the timing of this is really critical and also where this kind of got bumped out. Comp plan, finalizing the comp plan became bumped out with COVID, timeline extended, and again, being really rooted in what your goals and objectives are in the comp plan is really gonna tie into considerations, priorities, equity analysis that you're gonna wanna do with this development impact fee study. So what are we trying to accomplish in the comp plan? And this, again, can become another tool to accomplishing that.
You'll enjoy the exercise.
Yes.
You will.
These will be.
It's gonna give you a
great
different lens.
discussions.
Yeah, it'll give you a different lens to kind of view development through.
But to your point of, as a commissioner, you don't wanna be like ching ching dollar sign.
No.
Take that
412 rooftops to 500, please.
No.
I like to use the analogy bait and switch. If someone's moving to our community, we've got great parks, we've got good transportation. We've got, good fire and police service. As Jennifer mentioned, our general fund paid for maintenance and operations. And to Ben's question, the new tax value of those homes and structures should contribute to maintenance and operations. But if you don't have impact fees, then basically you're gonna be dumping on more use on these facilities, and you're not gonna have that money to expand them. So you're saying people come to our town, we've got great amenities and great services, but without those impact fees, there's no way to expand them proportionally to the growth. So you really need them in order to make sure that the town can grow and maintain its level of service in park, transportation, police, fire.
I have an announcement.
Yes.
My term is ending on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this will be the last time that I'll officially be a commissioner on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Right, but you
Um,
might be a member on the.
But I-
But would you
I-
like to stay on the
I'd
impact
love-
fee
I'd
committee?
love to stay on the advisory. committee. So, if you'll have me, I'll still there, but it's been great, working with all the commissioners. Thank you very much. And Amy, thank you for your leadership, and Sarah, thank you so much. And-
Your term's up already. How did
Yeah,
that go
I
so
came in and took over somebody else's.
I
so had
know,
2
just
years,
still seems like it
2
went
years.
really
know.
fast.
You and I came in at the same time,
Yeah,
yeah.
flew by.
think Slate's done too.
Yep,
Yes.
he served 2 terms in our bylaws on P and Z. Historically, we haven't always been following them. Actually,
Right.
not
Was it,
always.
is it 2
ever.
terms?
Yes,
Oh, I thought it was
that's
3, but,
P and Z bylaws.
okay,
I think some people serve more than 3.
yeah.
I think they took a 3-minute break and got reappointed.
All right, with no further business on the agenda then
Thank you.
tonight,
Thank you.
Thank you all.
this meeting is adjourned at 6:41 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And as usual, if you guys go home and sleep on this and then you're like, wheels are spinning, contact me anytime. Jennifer's probably not gonna want to take a million phone calls.